Welcome back to Piston Perspectives. I'm Elliot Custodio. This is Joe, GT Joey Limongelli, and Todd Warren. Today's topic of conversation, online, website-based car auctions. Now, they're not new, but they're certainly getting more and more popular, and you're not buying cars the way we used to. So what do you guys think about that?
It's a double-edged sword in a good way and a bad way, but
Okay.
in the long run, it's a good way. I mean, we used to wait for a newspaper or Hemmings once a month to get a car and look for something unless you went to a show. Look, it's really, really great, but you could get hung out to dry. I mean, if you put up a car for auction and you're expecting something, it's out there forever if you don't meet your reserve and you're trying to push a car a certain way, but you're exposed to the entire world just by a couple of clicks, and it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
You can track cars, track different brands, sports cars,
Yeah.
whatever. It's just, I think it's great.
It's interesting. You have that, cars listed on the web, gives you easy access to opportunities across the country or in different countries, right?
Yeah, sure.
You're seeing as much of that car as they were capable of photographing and willing to include in the listing,
Right.
as well as that description. You could send someone out there to do a PPI. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't, a pre-purchase inspection. That's one level removed from a live auction, a Barrett Jackson, a Mecum, an RM, where, again, you're not test driving the car. You often don't get to speak to the owner of the car.
You're taking a chance in a shorter period of time.
Right.
You're going for the moment more instead of the 5 days.
Well, there is an experience thing, and we should definitely dive into that. But you have, if you believe it's a level of comfort, a little more level of comfort because it's in front of you.
Right.
You know, maybe you can feel inside a
And
wheel well and whatever.
Go back to it. And go back to
And
it.
that's a level removed from when we
Yeah.
would see a car for sale at a dealership or
Right.
in front of someone's home, and then you can go through that process.
Well, that's what's nice as well. You get dealers that are actually putting cars on there.
Mm-hmm.
So you could get an individual, you could get a collector guy, or you could get a dealership, and then you have 3, 4, 5 days to regurgitate it all. And it's actually pretty good. The only drawbacks I see is if sometimes there's cars that shouldn't be on these auctions when you get peanut galleries, piling on and just making fun or trying to tank a certain car.
Yeah.
Or they're jealous. That's the other side of it. But, I think I'm saying bring a trailer, but most of them.
Right, well,
they do contain it where, if somebody's not being nice or it's not being constructive, they delete it.
There's a certain amount of regulation there. I know you're active on commenting.
On Bring a Trailer, yep.
On Bring a Trailer in particular, I've experienced a lot of people just yapping.
Right.
Wannabes. You could say this with most of the internet when it comes to blogging or even doing a YouTube video or even a podcast. Who are we, right? But anyone is now given the opportunity to have amplification of their voice, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they know what they're talking about. When you see those comments, and I know you in particular because you're good at checking those folks, when you see those comments come in and it's like, that's not exactly right. If people don't correct them, it winds up being treated as fact. Yeah. And that can have negative implications on an auction.
I think the way the internet is generally, it's a superb way to spread good information and an even better way to spread bad information.
That's well said.
And once it's out there, it doesn't go away. I certainly spend too much time looking at the things. It's hard not to. Yeah. I purposely stayed away from looking at them for a while because I knew that once I crossed that line, there'd be no coming back, and that's proven to be true. I think there are a lot of pros and a lot of cons, and they're different depending whether you're buying or selling. I've always wanted to see a car before I bought it. There's the number of people who now buy cars sight unseen has to have increased exponentially since the advent of these auctions.
Wild, right?
Has to have. I think the overwhelming majority of people who buy a car and bring a trailer, just to name one, because it's the one I'm most familiar with, don't see it. And the trust level, I think, has a lot to do with the site, and Bring a Trailer certainly seems to be the juggernaut and is generally trusted, I guess, for a variety of reasons. But one thing that I think, as a relatively relatively new user of the site, and that means I've probably been on it for 3 years or so, and it goes way, way earlier than that. It's I think at least 10 years old
Is
now.
it 10 years?
I think it's about 10 years. It's obviously become a juggernaut. It isn't the, kind of on the side thing, small club that it used to be, for better and for worse.
Right.
Some of the things that people complain about, I think especially long-term users who miss the original format and the original atmosphere, is that it is largely dominated by dealers. There are a lot of private sales, but there are a lot of dealers. But from a buyer getting comfort with buying a car on the site, from a dealer, especially from a dealer that uses Bring a Trailer for a significant portion of its business, they kind of have to be more upfront and more accurate, because if they're not, they'll get called out by the buyer.
Well, I mean, they have more to lose,
Exactly.
is what you're saying, yeah.
So if a dealer, reputations are built very, very quickly, for better and for worse, on these things. So a dealer that uses Bring a Trailer a lot, the really prolific dealers seem to be generally highly regarded, and I think they kind of have to be, because if they were out there cheating people, that would become known very, very quickly. And there are some new users, private and individuals, who very obviously post a whole bunch of pictures, but don't post a picture of that particular car's known weak spots.
Right.
It's just not there, or it's almost there, but the area you need to see is just out of the picture.
Right.
That's not by accident, and that will also often get called out, and those auctions often go very, very badly, because people pile on.
Yeah, well, I do appreciate that self-regulation aspect of.
Yeah.
I mean, you can almost argue, by loose definition, Bring a Trailer has almost become its own social network.
Yeah.
Right, because you're commenting on cars that you're not bidding on, and so are so many other folks.
I think it already has.
Yeah. So what I appreciate is, over time, you've seen the platform, and this is the same with Cars and Bids, and even on eBay to a certain extent, but you've seen things, the effort change and evolve over time to kind of comfort those concerns of prospective buyers. For example, they'll lift up the engine cover of an F360 where you can easily touch the exhaust, and they will put their bare hand on it as they're filming it,
Cold start.
to prove that the cold start is in fact the cold start.
Right.
Or
No check engine lights popping up.
you'll see them go around with the paint depth meter, right, for what that's worth. But I can see, all right, someone probably questioned, was that truly a cold start? And that evolved to this way of providing that evidence. And same thing with paint thickness and all that sort of stuff. They started early on with integrating Carfax, and that was cool, but this was an evolution even beyond that. So it is increasing the level of comfort. I think you're right. While it's not a guarantee a dealer is going, or anyone is going to do the right thing, they are more compelled to do the right thing because it's their business. They have more to lose over the whole span of running that business than trying to swindle someone on one car.
And
Absolutely.
It's not a local sale where, okay, this guy will disappear. It's around the world, and people harping on it. The guy did this, the guy did, and we've seen it. We've seen 100 times. Look, I was looking at an old '66 Corvette Stingray. I just wanted another coupe big block. And I didn't care if it was an aftermarket block, blah, blah, blah. But it was an original big block. And I was just looking at the pictures, and if you know your car, the Astons, the Jags, or whatever, I'm looking at the car, never touched, never repainted, and it looked like it was just patinaed to the max, right? Look, there's no pictures from underneath. We started getting pictures from underneath. And it's big block, but a replacement engine, so it's not 120 grand, it's 50, 60 grand, okay? You're in that market at this time. All of a sudden, he's got pictures underneath, and the frame, I could see my nose in the reflection when the guy takes the picture. Oh, well, we had a replacement frame.
Why was that not disclosed?
What happened? Was the car totaled and crushed? Well, we don't know, but we decided to respray and put a new frame under the car. And right there, you lose all credibility. The sale died. Nobody bought it. But somebody, if you looked at the original, write-up, it was an original car, never touched, virgin. Motor blew up at 60 years old, and you could put another motor in, whatever you want to do. Now all of a sudden it's got a replacement frame. What does that mean? It's a fiberglass car. Did it get cut in half? Were you in a bad accident? Was it rotted out? But it's really, really good, because, and then even if you resell the same product over, which is you're really tracking everybody all over the place. If I bought your Aston Martin and then had it for 3 years and sold it on the same site,
Right.
they don't get rid of the old
Right. I like
data.
that. It's an archive.
Right.
Yep.
It goes
Yep.
on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And you
Right,
know,
that's a good point. Whether it's that site or it moves anywhere else on the internet, it's leaving
forever.
a digital footprint,
It's forever.
right? You could look that up,
It's
where in
forever.
the past you couldn't.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
It's forever.
Have you guys bought from online auctions
Yeah.
before?
I have not.
Yeah.
I have not.
I've had some other, the other names and companies.
That's
but I-
not true. I did.
Yeah.
But it was a while ago. It was actually eBay, and because the car was listed on eBay, it had to be done through eBay. But
Right.
I got in touch with the seller who was a dealer and did it as though it hadn't been on eBay, but I
Yeah.
did find it on eBay.
Right.
So yes and no.
eBay, Hemmings was the original, and then they did it online. But they're kind of slow, and it's an older group.
But it's not an auction, though, right? That's really just an
Well,
online listing.
Right. They have
Hemmings,
listings.
Hemmings does have
They
auctions
have an
now.
auction.
They have it
It's-
now.
It's very antiquated. I'd say it's antiquated. It's a different kind of group. You know,
Yep.
if you want to buy a Model A or something
Yeah.
like that's where you're going. But these other cars, it's just
My
It's
luck wasn't so
fascinating.
good. I bought, from what I could remember, at least 2 cars, both through eBay Motors. One, I was just,
Motors.
yeah, I was looking for a beater SUV, and it was like a 99, 98 Explorer, and it got the job done. But driving with my wife out to Carlisle, sunroof's leaking. It was
yeah.
January or something
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Right.
Well, maybe it wasn't January because it was Carlisle. It was probably fall Carlisle. It was cold enough.
Yeah.
The sunroof is just peeing on my leg. It was
Yeah.
terrible. And then one of the reasons I got it, there were a lot of reasons I got it, but this particular one was also a 5-speed. I thought,
Yeah.
well, that was kind of different.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a very good one. The second purchase, years later, while that was a utility purchase, just as an aside, that's the result. Buying a Ford Explorer on eBay last minute in January is what happens when you get a brand new 2005 XK8 convertible and it snows for the next week.
You can't go anywhere. You had no choice.
You wind up buying an SUV
that's
and
You didn't
rushing
do your
in.
due diligence, right?
Yeah, but I didn't, at least I didn't
Well,
hurt the Jaguar.
Yeah.
But the second car was a 1980 RX-7 that was in California.
Right.
And it was 1980, it was first gen of the first gen. It was an SA.
Pull choke.
And pull choke. Black on black, pretty. It would look good in the photos. There was a story. It was.
Right.
This is going to sound ridiculous that you'd actually believe this, but I'm pretty sure the story was like it was his grandmother's. I'm like, oh, that's a pretty hip grandma.
Right.
And of course, grandmothers pass away in these stories, and the kid is stuck with the car.
78.
So,
2 years before the cars, man.
right. So anyway, long story short, the car was too cheap to justify a PPI, and years ago that wasn't really a common thing anyway. But even if it was,
Yeah.
I was throwing a couple grand at the car. It was a roll of the dice. It didn't pay to have someone inspect it. I took the guy on his word. I spoke to him on the phone after I won the auction. It sounded great. Paid to have it trailered, whatever. The car ran.
It ran.
It ran.
Pushing it
Smoked like crazy. So it clearly had apex seal issues, which is a rotary engine
Wow.
thing that was not disclosed. The paint was original. That was great. But it was all checked, maybe from the result of being a Southern California car. I thought I was buying a Southern California car. That's what you want. It's going to be no rust. And really, there was no rust.
Yeah.
It was sound in
Right.
those areas where that would be a concern. But the
But it
paint was shot.
cooked.
Yeah.
None of that was disclosed. And the photos looked fantastic.
Well, that's why.
So 0 for 2 with that.
Now, just
Interesting.
sticking on Bring a Trailer, they started out of California, right? The company's out of California.
You
guy
might
who-
be right,
The
actually.
guy who started it is,
I think he's
is
out
a
of
California guy,
right.
yeah.
Because they've evolved as well, and they, I have nothing to do with them. I'm not promoting them, but they have evolved because I've seen and talked to many people who get hyped up. They get involved in the auction, and then they buy something and they found, I really don't have either the money or it's not really what I wanted.
Yeah.
And they actually bail them out. So it's not like it's a cut and dry deal. So I've seen people bail out, which they're flexible. I've seen also they relist if something screwed up.
That happened this week, actually. I saw that.
Instead
Yeah.
of saying, this guy's a snake. There's something they're doing wrong. They're trying to screw me and sell the car. Blah blah blah. So they do work. Or they'll even pull cars off and then relist.
I think they're pretty angry when somebody, if,
Oh, I'm not saying
if
they're
you-
not
it's frowned
angry,
upon.
but I mean, you say they bail them out. I wouldn't say that. They keep the $5,000
No. I mean,
fee.
I mean bail out.
And they
you know,
often
yeah,
throw
but
the guy-
bail out the guy getting burned.
Well, the seller, they'll
Right.
relist the car, yes, but the
Right.
guy, the buyer who didn't follow through,
Right.
or if a seller,
Oh no, he'll lose the $5,000.
or if the seller
If it's that
misrepresented
high,
the car,
If it's that high,
yeah.
right.
If you don't do what
He'll
you're
lose the
supposed to do,
deposit.
they basically throw you off the site.
Oh, that I understand, but I'm saying they work
I have
with you.
noticed a change in the wording, though. When somebody backs out of a deal, it used to say that they've been banned from the site. Now it says something softer than that. I don't remember exactly
Yeah.
what it was. Something like, their use has been restricted.
Yeah.
So I don't know
I
what
think-
that means, but it sounds like it's less than a ban.
Is that the penalty for not following through?
It used to be
Yeah.
that
if
you would get banned?
If you won an auction
Yeah.
and you didn't follow through, you got thrown off the site.
Okay, that's actually kind of fair.
According to the follow-up post
Right.
in the auction,
Yeah.
it would say that, that when it was relisted, it would say this is a relisting because the previous sale, something
Fell
along the lines of
through.
the buyer didn't follow through, and he's been banned or something to that effect. Now it says use has been
Yeah.
restricted. So I don't know if they've actually changed the policy or they're accommodating of perhaps extenuating circumstances, but
Right.
in any case, it's bad, and you do lose the buyer fee and whatever
Well,
else.
again, it's a business, and it's a numbers game. And if you figure, look, when it first started, you go, wow, it's I got to put up $100, whatever it is, right? I think for the basic.
Well, you sign a
if you-
contract also. If
Yeah,
if
you're right.
you
but
win
I'm
the
saying
auction, you are
it's-
obligated
it's
to
so
follow through.
minimal. You're going to go to 50 bazillion people around the world, right? You got to remember, it's in China, it's in England, it's everywhere. It's not in an old
it's-
newspaper.
It has
and 50
changed.
people.
Yeah,
It changed
I mean,
everything.
it has definitely changed the car market. I
And
think
it's
for
created
the better and the worse.
markets.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And it's killed markets.
Yeah.
If you're watching trends, which we talk about, and our beloved Jaguars, and I won my E-Type guys, it's an aging out group. And all you have to do, and they show the flow charts, an E-Type was 175 to 250 restored coupe. Now it's 75 to 95. When 5 to 7 are listed every week, that means people are getting out of that market.
I have a question for you guys.
But it's amazing. He's a big Porsche guy. There's 9 million Porsches, and the numbers are still up.
Well, they're starting to soften a little bit,
a
but
little
well.
bit.
here's a question. I don't know the answer. I don't know if there is an
Well, you
answer.
could ask.
So I'm going to ask, and we'll see what happens.
All right.
So, you looked at. Let's go back a couple of years, although it's probably just as relevant now. You looked at what cars went for at, let's say, a Mecum auction.
Right.
I'm trying to keep it auctions
Right.
that are relative to one another, right? I'm not going to throw in a Bonhams with that type of
Different
car.
level.
But let's compare a Barrett Jackson to a Mecum, and the same car you might see at both, right? There's a lot of overlap in the types of cars you see at both. Generally speaking, and this is purely anecdotal, but I've noticed typically the higher prices come from the Barrett Jackson sales and not the Mecum sales.
Yes.
Is that a thing? Because you'll see higher prices, again, anecdotally, but it's my observation, you'll see higher prices on Bring a Trailer than you will on P-Car Market for the Porsches,
Yep.
cars and bids for like cars and whatnot.
Yeah.
Is it
There's a lot
lack of
different-
people? Is it just the hype of the environment, like
There-
a Barrett
there's
Jackson? It's an
there's a lot.
experience.
I've gone to a lot of them. I don't want to get in trouble, neither do you. But look, one scenario is especially at the largest one there, which is Barrett Jackson. They put guys 10 years older than us. They all go there. They got a little free cash. They have a lot of young women walking around. A lot of booze for free. That's scenario number one, and they just get pumped up, and I gotta have it. And people are pumping them up to buy a car. There could be other things going on, and people are helping getting the bids to certain numbers. But then if you watched a couple of those auctions over the years, you started seeing when it was very hot, early 2000s, right, on Speed Vision, and there was
Yeah.
Velocity.
Yep.
It was the same cars over and over, and then people catching on. Listen, what's going on here? It's just like we're moving from one market to the other market. But you're seeing an aging out. That's already 20 years ago, where that's why the online stuff like Bring a Trailer and all that, it's very current. It's right now, but
Well, it's
you're just
constant.
seeing
It's literally continuous.
it's continuous.
You don't have
right.
months between auctions
Correct,
like you do
right.
with the in-person.
Right. Do you guys agree with maybe I'm wrong. Do you agree with my observation that
Yeah, well,
it seems like there's a higher, a trend of
think-
higher
I
prices
think
at one versus
I
another?
think Haggerty's and Hemmings for a while, they used to give you the car auctions, and then Barrett Jackson was all by itself and wasn't in the mix because everything was 20-30% higher on average.
You know, I can't.
But now
I
there's
haven't.
also higher fees.
And you
Yeah.
could argue they
Depends on
have
the
nicer inventory, maybe.
You could. I mean,
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
I've seen. I haven't been on site to either Barrett Jackson or Mecum auction.
Yeah.
I've seen them televised.
Yeah.
I think Mecum actually sells more cars in total than
Oh, yeah, they
Barrett
move
Jackson does,
more volume.
right? So
Right.
probably a smaller portion of the Mecum cars are high end.
Right.
Maybe that has something to do with it. I can't say that. I can't say that I've looked carefully enough to to say that Barrett Jackson prices are higher than Mecum. If you asked me which, I would guess Barrett Jackson.
Yeah.
But it really is anecdotal. There's
Yeah,
nothing.
and I think
scientific in that.
I think you guys are right. The other thing is too, you got to remember the points in and out. They were 12. I think they're down to 10 in and out. They cut back a little because the interest rates went up, and that's all. You got to take that into consideration.
And the online-
interest rates, economy, online.
Right. The online fees are much lower.
Right.
Right.
You're
Bring
looking at a
a
couple
trailer's
$100.
commission is capped at it's 5% up to $100,000. The
Five
bid
grand.
that is, and
Five
above $100,000 bid or sell, it's capped at $5,000.
Okay.
And it's $99 to
Right.
to
$100.
put the car in.
$5
You
grand
can
max.
you can pay more for
depending on
premium
the car.
services, whatever, but you can
Yeah.
list your car and bring a trailer for $99. You
But
can't
the
get anywhere
only-
near there at an
Yeah,
on-site,
the only
an
other- the-
an in-person auction.
Yeah, the only flip side to that is if you get the the keyboard Gestapos, we call it.
You get a lot of that.
And they're just blowing things up, and I know
And-
everything, you don't know anything.
Right.
Yep.
And
that's terrible.
that gets me to my next
Right.
point. Sometimes an online auction, rapidly goes downhill because somebody says
Right.
something. Oh, it looks like there's rust there, and the car could be aluminum or fiberglass for that matter.
That's right.
And somebody says, "Oh, is that rust? I think that's rust," and then people just jump on
Right.
it. It's the whole
I
mob
saw the car
mentality.
smashed on the LIA.
Yeah,
It was
it's the whole
totaled
mob
out.
mentality.
Never
Oh, I
the
saw this
in my
car 3 years ago, whatever, and it was a complete total disaster. This is the same car. I'm sure of it. And people say, "Well, that's it," and they all bail out. And it turns out the guy was simply wrong.
Yeah.
So sometimes these auctions online just completely go down the toilet because some guy
Yeah.
just says something that is often just completely untrue. Sometimes it's accurate. Sometimes
I know that
sometimes
firsthand.
they point out something that is actually an
One of
issue.
my cars was on Bring a Trailer, a '67 Mustang, and of course everyone seems to know everything about '67 Mustangs and all the comments, right?
Mm-hmm.
People were questioning things, and I was answering them, and I was showing pictures, and then I even said, "Guys, it's available here.
Right.
Come and take a look at it, like in person."
Yep.
0 people took me up on it. Instead, they just kind of battled amongst themselves about it should have this or it shouldn't have it.
Yeah.
And then eventually, and this is why I appreciated how it kind of self-regulated itself, somebody said, "What's wrong with you guys? The seller could not have been any more forthcoming and invited you guys to come check it out, and none of you did."
Yeah.
But it ultimately had a negative effect on the auction because there was so many questions being posed.
Right.
Yep. It just puts a question mark over the whole thing.
Right. And again,
and you don't
amplifying the
recover
voice
from
of
that.
people that shouldn't
Yeah.
be speaking.
Right.
That don't know what they're talking about.
It's very relevant. It's very current. We need it, especially to keep the hobby going.
Yeah.
I don't know how much more time we have to talk about it.
I think that makes sense. But there's one other thing. I think, and again, this is mostly based on my experience on Bring a Trailer. There is a perception by many people, not all, that if a given car, model type, etc., a 2006 Aston Martin DB9 is bid to a point, whether it sells or not, a lot of people will decide, especially if the number is low, that's the new market.
Oh, yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
The market has spoken. They say this all the time. You always
Right.
see the market has spoken. Well, it is part of the market, but it isn't the whole
whole
market.
entire market.
And while it has worldwide exposure, whatever, yes, but that doesn't mean that
Right.
people who are actually in the market for that car
Right.
and
Yeah.
able to buy it, and that car meets their requirements for all these reasons, colors, accessories, options, whatever else, may or may not be there that day.
Right. Right.
So that car, that day, that moment, that auction does not establish market value. And a lot of people will say, well, if nobody's willing to buy it at the price the seller wants, the
Right.
seller's price is too high, the reserve is too high. That's not necessarily the case either. The buyer doesn't set the market, neither does the seller. You need a buyer and a seller to agree on a price. Then there's a transaction, and then you can say that car in that moment was worth that money. If it doesn't meet reserve, it means either the high bid was too low, the seller's reserve was too high, or somewhere in between.
Or the right buyer
that's how you-
was not in the
And
room
all
when it
of
was
that.
being sold.
It's one point in time, even 1 week in time, at the time that it sells or the auction ends at a reserve not met.
Yeah.
That's one moment in time,
Yeah.
one auction. So it's indicative of the market, but the notion that it is the market.
Well, it's
just
funny how
flat
that
out false.
affects psychology. I was watching this video earlier this week, but I think the video was maybe a month ago. And it was Doug DeMuro talking about auctions through his Cars and Bids website. But he was talking about the mentality behind a no reserve auction. And there's a lot of arguments whether you should put a reserve, whether you shouldn't put a reserve. And obviously, while Doug does seem very genuine, yeah, he's an owner in the site, so of course he's going to want it to be no reserve. However, he made a point that I think made a lot of sense, so I believed it. And that point was, one of the reasons why he encourages a no reserve auction is because when the bidding's happening and they break reserve, he said that the buyer's psychology beyond that point starts to get icky because it's easy to think I'm overpaying for this car because the seller believed it was worth this, and now me and these other people are pushing it to here. Whereas if there was no reserve, it's just kind of open and the market just kind of does what it does, even if it's based on emotions. I thought that was pretty clever.
Does he require the seller to disclose when the reserve has been met?
No, and he encourages them not to disclose that.
Largely for that reason, I would guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Flatline the
Yep.
sale.
Yeah.
Now, one other issue with auctions, I think, and like if I were looking for a car and it's on Bring a Trailer, especially if I had to travel some to go see it, assuming I want to go see it before I decide to bid.
And Bring a Trailer.
If it's on Bring a Trailer and it's somewhere else, I can go see the car, think it's great. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it though. Whereas if the car is a private sale or at a dealer, I go there and I look at it.
Yeah.
Unless somebody has beaten me to it. If I want it, I can buy it.
Yeah.
Right.
But on an auction, any auction, whether it's online or not, you can go look at the car, decide it's the greatest thing, you got to have it.
But there are
you
logistics.
don't know if you're going to be the high bidder.
Yeah.
Whatever your limit is, may simply be exceeded by a guy who wants it more, has more money, whatever else.
Yeah.
So that I think is something of a deterrent to actually going and seeing a car because you can go see it, and you don't know if you can own it.
Yeah. All right. With that said, sold. That's the end of this episode. This was good. This was spirited. We're going to do this again. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you soon. And don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.